After the Bills defeated the Miami Dolphins on Sunday afternoon by a final score of 30-27, now they turn their attention to the trade deadline, which is today at 4 p.m. And considering the injury report, I think we're going to see at least one, if not two moves. I know the Bills can shuffle some things around. Maybe they can elevate some players from the practice squad. But considering that Keon Coleman could be out long term, Sean McDermott did not specify yesterday. He said they don't know yet whether it's going to be short term or long term. He's dealing with that wrist injury thanks to Jordan Poyer with that dirty hit. Jawan Smoot is having wrist surgery. The Bills are placing him on IR. The Bills were already without Amari Cooper and Christian Benford with wrist injuries. I don't know what it is with these wrist injuries. Don't forget, Dwayne Carter also had a wrist injury. He's on IR. The good news is Cooper and Benford are day to day. But with Coleman potentially being sidelined for a few weeks here, the Bills really might want to look in the wide receiver direction once again. Now, regardless if they want to look at another wide receiver or not, I think the biggest position here that the Bills could address today and maybe should address is defensive line. So let's start with my first player on the board here in Zadarius Smith. Because if the Bills can get him, I feel like this would be another Amari Cooper, where his contract is very tradable. When you look at the contract that he signed with the Browns, it was a 2-year, $23 million extension. His base salary this year is only $1.2 million. We're going into week 10, so the Bills wouldn't even have to pay that full $1.2 million salary. So the fact that you could get Zadarius Smith for less than $1 million, I think that is a deal that you should pounce all over if you can get it, because this is a guy who's been very productive ever since coming into the league in 2015. He came in with the Ravens, played his rookie deal with them. Then he signed with the Packers in 2019 when he was a Pro Bowler, had a career high 13 and a half sacks. Followed that up with 12 and a half sacks the following year for Green Bay, also Pro Bowler, second team All Pro, played one more year in Green Bay, and he suffered a season ending injury. So he only played one game. But then he signed with Minnesota, really had a great bounce back year. He finished in the top 10 in comeback player of the year voting, had double digit sacks again with 10. And then he signed that deal with the Browns. He had 5.5 sacks last year, and he has 5 this year. So I think that if you can get him on the opposite side of Von Miller or Greg Rousseau for that matter, especially considering that Juwan Smoot is going to be out for the foreseeable future, I think that is definitely a veteran player that you could use to bolster that defense. Because if you look at that Dolphins game yesterday, I know Tua gets the ball out quickly, but the Bills just could not generate any pressure. So let's stick with the defensive line. And my second player of target here is Jaguars defensive tackle Jeremiah Ledbetter. Ledbetter is playing his sixth season in the NFL. His first season came in 2017 with Detroit. Then he went to Tampa Bay in 2018 and 2020, did not play the 2019 season. Then he signed with Jacksonville in 2022, 2023, and then he re signed with the Jaguars this past offseason on a 1-year, $1.9 million contract. So I guess that's a good place to start with him, because if you look at that base salary, he's another one, $1.1 million. And considering where we're at in the season, the Bills could get him for less than $1 million as well. Now, Ledbetter, the football player, I think he would fit in with what the Bills are looking for here on the defensive line, because he's that rotational piece. And if you look at his box stats here, he's played in 7 games so far this year. He started 3 of them. And when Kevin Masseri and I had Jared Feinberg on a few weeks ago, actually, it was when the Bills were playing the Jaguars ahead of that week 3 matchup. And he was saying how the Jaguars go with that rotation on their defensive line. And Ledbetter was one of those guys, as a stat show, that they just kind of rotate them through. So he has 22 tackles and 1 sack this year. And he's listed at 6'3", 300 pounds. So, Dwayne Carter should be back within the next few weeks, but I think he could be a nice placeholder. And again, just you're bolstering that defensive line for potentially seeing Derrick Henry in the playoffs. And with Jacksonville potentially in sell mode, they traded Cam Robinson to the Vikings last week. I think this is a team that you would go after and say, you know what? If you guys are trying to build for the future, we'll give you a late round draft pick for Ledbetter. People have been talking about Eric Armstead. Now, he signed that big 3-year deal with them in the offseason. I don't think that contract is as tradable as Ledbetter. And going back to my previous player here with Zadarius Smith, a lot of people have been talking about Myles Garrett, but the same reason that I just said with Armstead. I don't think that that's a tradable contract, and I don't think that the Browns are going to want to trade Garrett. And all the rumors and reports that I've heard said that it's more likely that they move on from Smith than it is Myles Garrett. So if the Bills could get Zadarius Smith and or Jeremiah Ledbetter, I think those would be 2 great additions to their defensive line that is hobbled with injuries. Even if they're not hobbled, you just want to build it up the best that you can to defend a powerful running attack like Derrick Henry in the playoffs. Sticking with Jacksonville now, my third player on this trade target list is safety Andre Cisco. Again, I don't know if Jacksonville is totally in sell mode or not. Cisco is a younger player. He is still on his rookie contract, came into the league in 2021. But if they are looking to build for the future, and if you can pry him away from that roster and put him on yours, I think that would be a huge upgrade. Now, the safety position has been very interesting right along because Damar Hamlin is still holding the fort down and Mike Edwards is still a healthy scratch. So I guess we need to talk about Mike Edwards because what's the deal with him? There was a report that Mike Edwards has requested a trade. I haven't heard anything since then, but if he can't get on the field, then I don't know if that's because he's just playing that bad or he can't pick up the playbook, or maybe they're just that high on Damar Hamlin. So maybe that means that they're just going to leave the safety room as is. And then if they do decide to make a change, you always have Mike Edwards who can come in. But if the Bills want to look to address that position, I think Cisco would be a very, very solid addition. Now, if you look at Cisco's individual stats, he's having a pretty solid season. He started all 9 games that he's played so far this season, 41 combined tackles, 1 interception, and 4 passes defended. Now, previously, last year, he started all 15 games that he played in, recorded 62 tackles, had a career high 4 interceptions, and 5 passes defended. The year before that, 73 tackles, 3 interceptions, and a career best 10 passes defended. The problem is Jacksonville has a second worst pass defense in the NFL, giving up over 264 yards per game. And PFF also does not like Cisco. His grade is 54.4. So maybe that's an opportunity where the Bills can say, you know what, we can coach him up. We can put him in Sean McDermott's system here, and maybe we can get a little bit more bang for our buck. Maybe we don't have to give up as much considering the circumstances here. And Jacksonville will say, you know what, give us a 6th-round pick and we'll give you Cisco. For the fourth player on my trade target list, I want to go back to the defensive line because I think this could be a sneaky addition, and that is defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph Day. Now, he's playing with the Titans this year after he signed a 1-year, $4 million contract. So his base salary is $1.4 million, a little bit more than the previous players that I mentioned, but still, I mean, that is nothing compared to some of these other contracts that are out there. So I think the Bills could definitely take a swing at that. And the interesting thing about Joseph Day is that not only do I remember that a lot of Bills fans were saying that he would be a nice piece to this defensive line this past offseason, and that was before they signed Austin Johnson. But if you look at his numbers here, this is his 6th season in the league. He came into the league with the Rams in 2019. So he played there for 3 years. Then he signed with the Chargers, had a quick stint with San Francisco. And now, as I said, he's with the Titans. But he's played inside and outside. And I think that could be a perfect Juan Smoot replacement. And if you're looking for a little bit of size there, Joseph Day comes in listed at 6'4", 310 pounds, and he's been pretty productive so far this year for Tennessee. He started 6 of the 8 games that he's played in. He has 3 sacks and 21 tackles. So again, just a very good depth piece if the Bills were to acquire him. And the final player on my list is Patriots wide receiver KJ Osborne. Now, this is another guy who I wanted the Bills to sign in the offseason, so maybe I have a little bit of bias here, but I'm trying to think of the right circumstances because you don't want to get someone who could block Coleman when he returns, hopefully from that wrist injury, right? Whenever that is. And the Bills already went after that big fish item with Amari Cooper. So I really don't know if they're going to do anything. They could simply just give Curtis Samuel more snaps and more targets, or they could elevate someone like a KJ Hamler or Tyrell Shavers from the practice squad. They've been elevating Jalen Virgil. But if they want to go after someone, I think Osborne makes a lot of sense because he's versatile, he has athleticism, and I think he provides the element that Joe Brady's looking for in that offense where he could get yards after the catch and he's a good separator. And if you look at the Patriots depth chart, it's kind of a logjam of a bunch of similar skill sets. They don't really have that one guy that stands out. So they're rolling with Kayshon Boutte right now, Kendrick Bourne, who I have heard his name in some trade rumors. That could be interesting, but they gave him a pretty sizable 3-year contract in the offseason. So I don't think they're going to move on from him. Demario Douglas is their slot receiver. And then they have rookies Javon Baker and Jalen Polk. They have Tyquan Thornton, who was a 2nd-round pick in 2022. And then there's Osborne. So Osborne really hasn't done much this year, He's dealt with some injuries. He's only played in 6 games, started 4 of them, and he only has 7 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. So kind of like Curtis Samuel in a way. So I feel like if you put him down on the depth chart with Mac Hollins as that wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, just until the Bills can get healthy again with Coleman and Cooper, then that could be a pretty good addition there. And the point that I always make is that he went to UB for college. So bring on KJ Osborne to the homeland here. But if you're saying, okay, KJ Osborne really isn't that good, why give up a draft pick for him? Maybe there's someone else, and that someone else could be Adam Thielen. Now, Thielen is a little bit more on the pricey side as he signed that 3-year, $25 million contract a couple of off seasons ago with Carolina. So right now his base salary is $5.5 million, and next year he will have a cap hit of about $9 million. So again, a little bit more on the pricey side, and that's why I like Osborne so much because his deal was 1 year, $4 million, probably a little bit too much considering his production, but his base salary is not nearly as much as it is just $1.2 million. And considering where we're at in the season, it'll be even less than that. So it's more of a tradable contract. So there you go. There are 5 players, technically 6 with the honorable mention on Adam Thielen. But either way, 5 or 6 players who I think that Brandon Beane could and maybe even should make a deal for as we approach this deadline at 4 o'clock. So with that, we will try to have coverage for you throughout the day. And then make sure you tune into the Going Deep Buffalo podcast tomorrow night at 8 o'clock as Kevin Masseri and I will have full coverage of what happens on trade deadline day.